Hi there folks, Joel Self, Outdoor Instructor here, and back inside for today's video. This is actually one of the most requested videos I've had, and the question that goes with it is, what gear do you have on your harness for personal trad climbing? So what does my personal trad rack look like? That's what we're going to go through today, but I just wanted to straight off the bat say that this is my personal rack, and therefore it's not what I recommend you go out and buy. It's not what I recommend beginners carry. It's not what I recommend for your advanced trad rack. It just happens to be the gear that I've drawn together and that I use. So we're going to start off going through some kit, but it's all very situational. Some of it I'm going to use only on long, easy routes. Some of it I'm only going to carry on really short, really hard routes. But it just depends on what gear the route requires. I'm also going to try and keep this video super short. I've now filmed it 3 times, and every time I film it, it comes out at being about 20 minutes long, which I'd rather keep it shorter if we can. So let's get straight into it. I'm going to be carrying some form of nuts, stoppers, wedges, whatever you want to call them. These are some old Wild Country nuts. They're really nice, really like these. I've got double set of the bigger ones and almost a triple set of the smaller ones. So the smaller set are 1 to 5. Sorry, 1 to 5, and the bigger lot are 6 to 10. And these are not fancy. They're not, I don't know, sort of neatly and nicely color coded or anything. They're just ragtag nuts, and I really like them. So the way a nut actually works, for those of you who are unsure, use a nice big one so it's clearer on the camera. You find a constriction in the rock, and let's do it over there. Constriction in the rock. You place your nut into that crack and pull it down until it sits within the constriction, and that way, when you if you happened to fall off, you'd have your quick draw clipped to the end of this metal loop, and this then catches you, stops you plummeting off the edge of the mountain. So sort of a really standard bit of climbing equipment. One of the original ways that climbers would have protected themselves, and is still the way that I protect myself on almost every climb I go up nowadays. These are with me in some form or another on almost every route. I certainly don't carry all of these every time I go climbing. I might carry them all if I was going up some like really long mountainous stuff, but then I'm probably not carrying any of the other kit that we're going to talk about in terms of protection. I'll probably just have these, some quick draws, and my belay stuff. But I will carry these in smaller doses when it comes to hard climbing. There's almost never a route where you don't carry nuts, in my opinion. The only exception to that might be when I've climbed in the Peak District a bit, and then you use loads of cans and loads of hexes, and nuts less so. But these are really brilliant. I carry these for my personal climbing, and then I've got some nice brightly coloured anodized ones that I use with groups, because these are just a bit rough for that. But I like them, and they'll be on my harness in one form or another, ready for use. Goodness, we're 4 minutes in. I've just talked about nuts. Okay, we'll try and speed this up a little bit. We have got Hexs next. These will also be on my harness. There are 4 in this DMM Torque Nuts set. These are the middle 2 sizes. So there's a smaller green one and a bigger blue one. I don't really tend to carry those. The smaller green one is similar to the larger size of nut that I've got there. It is slightly bigger, but not much. And the blue one is just massive. I only carry that on super easy climbing. But yeah, these really belong in really big holes in the rock, and that you don't tend to get those on harder climbs. So the Hexs are something I don't carry on many routes. I don't climb a huge amount of super easy stuff. I'm talking like lower than VDiff sometimes, is where you'd find the Hexs to be most useful. They absolutely have got place on other routes, don't get me wrong. But just in my experience, I'm happy to place a nut and then make a couple of moves past maybe that big Hexs spot to the next nut placement. I'm quite happy climbing at those lower grades and don't feel that I need to have the hexes with me all the time. But that's just me personally. Next thing, we're kind of going from low tech to high tech. We've gone from passive gear to active gear. If you don't know the difference, I am going to bring out a video on it. I've actually already filmed it, but it's not been released yet because people were asking other things that I felt needed to be addressed first. So these are cams. They're mechanical bits of protection. So there's a trigger mechanism. As you pull down on the trigger, that constricts the lobes of the cam. You pop that into the crack and you release the trigger and they'll expand towards the edges. And then as you pull on this, it forces that to try and open up even more, which makes it secure in the crack. Yeah, so these will be on my harness. I have got here selection of 3, 2.5 and 2, and then I've also got a really tiny 0.5. These are normally the cams that I'll carry if I'm going out and I don't know the route. Then I'll sort of take this quick selection. These, along with the nuts, will allow me to climb pretty much anything. If I know that I'm going to work up a really, huge off-width crack system, then I'm going to take some bigger cams. And if I know that I'm going to be working in really, really tiny crack systems, then I'm not going to bother taking the bigger ones, and some are even bigger than these. I'll take loads of the smaller ones. But again, these are something I normally don't carry on big mountains. I'll carry these on shorter, sort of like single or maybe 2 pitch climbs, and I'll only carry them if I think I'm really going to need them. I don't like carrying excess weight up the crag, and cams are fairly weighty. By the time you get a full range of them and double up a couple of sizes that you think are going to be commonly used on the route, that's going to be a fair bit of weight, certainly more than the nuts do weigh. So yeah, these are on my harness some of the time, but not all of the time. And these are the Helium Friends by Wild Country. I think that's what they're called. If it's not what they're called, I'll flash their name up across the middle of the screen now. So those will be on my harness. So that's all the kind of like leader placed protection that I'll be carrying. Then we need to connect that to our rope somehow. And just for sake of reference, I climb on half ropes 99% of the time, and I climb on a single rope 1% of the time. On trad, that is. So yeah, let's talk about quick draws then. We've got some sort of single length draws. These are Wild Country ones. It's a 18 centimeter draw. The reason we use slightly longer draws on trad is so that all the movement can happen in the sling and very little movement gets transferred through to your piece of gear that's in the rock. Because if you move that bit of gear too much, you could compromise how well seated it is. So it might be that with a cam, it will wiggle into the rock and it will get stuck in a really awkward way, and your second won't be able to come up and get it out. Or with the nuts, it might wiggle them up and out of the hole altogether, and now you've lost a piece of protection. So having those longer slings allows more movement to happen in the sling of the quick draw rather than it happening in the gear. So we carry these, they're slightly longer, but also it's a skinny sling. Keep them as lightweight as we can. And they come in all sorts of different models and makes and everything else. I just happen to have a wire gate on the rope side and a solid gate on the gear side on this particular one. I've got all sorts of quick draws, and they're not all the same. This just happens to be an example of one of them. And then extendable quick draws, I love these. I probably carry a lot more of these than I do single length draws. So this is a bit of DMM sling on 2 DMM carabiners. You open the carabiner up on one end, unclipping it from everything, and then clip one strand, pull it out, and it will extend to be a really nice long quick draw. There will be a video on how to set these up ready for use at some point soon, but for today we'll just show you that that's how they open up. So again, you clip one side of the gear, one side of the rope, and all the movement then happens in the sling. And this can also really help reduce rope drag. So if your climb goes up, off to one side, off the other side, off the other side, your rope's going to be doing that as well. Whereas if we can extend your gear placements out by using these nice extendable quick draws, That way your rope's going to run in a straighter line up the crag. I mean that you as a leader feel less drag on the rope. So those will be on my harness. And then we start getting towards more anchor building stuff. So we'll have a quick look. I will carry a load of 120 slings. These go over the shoulder and get clipped together, and then I just slide the carabiner under my arm. These are all wild country slings, just by chance, I think. They're nice skinny ones, which makes them lightweight, which is cool. And then I'll carry them on boa screw gate carabiners, just because if I've got these on screw gates, when it comes to anchor building, I'm not trying to find more screw gates to use them with. And if I need to use the mid route, I just clip the screw gate on, but leave the screw gate undone. Because if you put these round a tree or something, clip the rope to it and do the gate up, when your second gets there, if they cannot open up the gate of the carabiner because it's got, you know, some grit in it or something, you're going to find that they're stuck underneath that piece of protection. And if it's around a tree and they can't just lift it off a boulder, there's not really any way for them to get this off without cutting it. So one thing that I do carry that's very controversial amongst climbers is a knife, because I've got to a piece of gear before that was a sling around a tree. They'd done up the gate and it was totally stuck. And I shouted up to them, we talked about it for a bit, and I said, oh, well, you shouldn't really do gates up mid-route. And they said, oh yeah, that's the one that sticks all the time. And I said, oh, brilliant. So yeah, after a while of faffing with it and trying to, you know, bash it with another one and trying to weight it to, you know, make it a bit easier to undo, nothing was working. And my mate just said, have you got your knife? I said, yes. So we cut the sling, and moved on, and the carabiner never came off. I had to untie to get it off the rope, and it was promptly binned. But that's why I carry screw gates on there. Also why there'll be a knife on the back of my harness. So people argue that you shouldn't carry knives when climbing. I agree that most people shouldn't, but as mentioned, this is my trad rack, and therefore I will be carrying a knife on my rack in my personal climbing. Certainly doesn't need to go with me everywhere. Lots of situations where you don't need to have this, and I see people with them far too much for my liking, because I do wonder what people think they're going to start doing with that knife. So that's those bits covered. Let's have a look at a belay device, shall we? When we get to an anchor, once we've built our belay, we need to attach a belay device to it. So I use the Kong GG. It's a really nice simple guide plate. It's 4 holes in a plate of metal. Doesn't really get much more simple. And I rack it on my harness, as you see here, with the 2 HMS carabiners, and it all clips together, so that when I take it off my harness, I've got everything I need for guide mode. If you don't know how to use a guide plate in guide mode, I've actually done a video on this, so there'll be a link down in the description. Do check that out. That'll be on the very back of my harness, because it's only going to be used when I'm at the belay. Other bits that I carry to build belay, I'll carry 3 HMS carabiners, all screw gates. These are not attached to anything else, and they'll be racked onto my harness individually, not all clipped together like this. And if they're set up like that, it means that I have just got these extra ones to hand. I don't have to take something off of them. So if they're always on a sling, well, now I've got to stow the sling somehow if I need just the carabiner. So having the spare carabiners is a nice luxury that I feel I can afford myself, because these are super lightweight. The Mammut, I don't know what model they're, I'm afraid. I'll also carry a nice big chunky 240 sling. For belay building, brilliant when you've got to equalise more than just 2 bits of kit. So if you're looking at 3 or 4 bits of gear in the wall, then you can get this out and start equalising those. Also brilliant to put around a massive boulder or around a huge tree. So lots of different applications at the belay. Again, not going to be used for anything else, so it'll be right at the rear of the harness so that I've got it when I need it, but it's not going to be in the way the rest of the time. And then the absolute last bits I've got are 2 Prusiks. So we've got a 60cm Prusik and a 120cm Prusik. Why are these so long? Well, because it makes them more versatile. I can use them in more situations. So I can make more efficient ascending systems, for example, you could have a some people have got these really tiny Prusik loops, and that's fine, as long as you are able to tie a proper Prusik with it, then that's no problem. But I carry slightly longer ones because it means that I can be more efficient when I need to ascend the rope on a pair of Prusiks. Link to that video down in the description too. I can also use these to build systems in a self-rescue situation, to get myself out of the belay or to haul my friend up, whatever the case may be. So just having those slightly longer Prusiks I find is a good idea, and each of those is just on a DMM Aero carabiner. And I'll carry 2 Prusiks all the time. If you've only got one, you can find yourself in some interesting difficulties. Sorry, camera died. Final bit of kit we're going to talk about is nut key. Really, really crucial to have with you for when you're seconding or when you've placed that bit of gear and you just want to get it back out, place it a little bit better or use something else. So I have a nut key. Just use a small bit of accessory cord to attach it to a carabiner so that I can clip this on the rope and faff getting the bit of gear out without fearing about dropping all of this off the side of the mountain. So that's the final bit of kit that I carry with me. That covers everything, I suppose, other than the harness itself, which is a Petzl Adjammer harness. It's just a 5-gear loop, lightweight, bog standard harness that I use for everything. At the moment it's got the Petzl Connect Adjust attached to it. Sometimes I'll carry that when I'm trad climbing, but very irregularly. It's more for when I'm going out with groups that I'll be carrying something like that. Well, that's all the bits and pieces. I've tried to go through it there really as quickly as I can to keep this video under 20 minutes, and it looks like we're only just about to make that. So thank you very much for watching. Well done to you if you made it all the way through all that waffle and faff that I've just spouted at you for the last 18 minutes. But thank you for watching. I do appreciate it, and I hope there was something interesting and helpful in there for you. I've been Joseph Outdoor Instructor. That's all we've got for today. Thank you very much for watching, and goodbye.